Mr. Pop. Dark.
And the little birds are nesting, and I listen to them too. There's two lonesome people in the whole wide world. That's me and the man in the moon.
Hello and welcome to Miskatonic University Radio, the podcast exploring Fantasy Flight Games' Arkham Horror the Card Game. I'm Dana.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Ben.
And today, we're back in the studio to return to the Scarlet Keys to talk all about investigators. It's the Investigators of Arkham, the Scarlet Keys edition.
And we have not one, not two, not three, not four, not five.
Not seven.
But 6 new investigators to talk about, right?
Yeah.
It's a good number.
Which is very special. That's only happened a couple of times before.
Is there any interesting math trivia about the number 6?
No. It's actually a perfect number, which I think means that all of its divisors except itself add up to itself. But I always thought that was kind of dumb. Like, what's the point of that? Nobody really cares about this. Is what I'm getting at.
True.
Nevertheless, a very aesthetically pleasing number. You know, we all love the classic hexagon, one of the top shapes. I'm sure we'd all agree. So, I do have a lot of fondness for the number 6.
Right.
Yeah.
And so speaking of numbers, a number similar to 6, but not quite, just to remind everybody, when we do these investigator episodes, for each investigator we talk about, we're trying to answer 5 questions. What is their greatest strength? What is their greatest flaw? What kind of role can they play in a group or on their own? What are some of their favorite cards? And lastly, kind of a fun one, what movie would they star in? Or another way to think about it is if you're going to try to watch a movie to get in the mood to play this investigator, which one would it be? And we usually try to pick a movie that's at least sort of good or interesting and also sort of matches with what the investigator is all about. And whenever possible, we try to pick one that at least one or more of us has seen. So hopefully we'll be able to do that today. So without delaying any longer, should we just start immediately talking about these 6 investigators?
Yeah, let's do it. Starting with the Guardians.
All right.
Yeah, so first up we got Carson Sinclair, the butler. He is the guardian of the pack. He has a 2 in every stat, and he's an assistant. He has 6 health, 6 sanity, and his ability is, you may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used on the below action ability. And that ability is, choose another investigator at your location. They immediately take an action as if it were their turn. Limit once per round for each investigator. And the Elder Sign effect is a +0, draw 1 card. You may resolve this effect anytime another investigator at your location resolves their Elder Sign effect. His deck building is similar to, is it Mandy and Tony? At deck creation, he picks between Seeker, Mystic, or Survivor. And then he has Guardian level 0 to 5, Neutral 0 to 5, and then up to 10 cards level 0 to 1 that are events or skills of that chosen secondary class. Deck requirements, he has 2 copies of his signature As You Wish, and 1 copy of his weakness, plus the random basic weakness. I'll read his cards quick. So his As You Wish is a skill card with 3 wild symbols on it. He can only commit it to skill tests being performed by another investigator. If the test succeeds, the performing investigator draws a card. If it fails, you draw 1 card. And then he has Selfless to a Fault as his weakness. It's a flaw, treachery. Put Selfless to a Fault into play in your threat area. Forced at the end of your turn, if you do not commit at least 1 card to a skill test performed by another investigator this turn, take 1 horror and shuffle Selfless to a Fault into your deck.
So I know Ben has played Carson through a whole campaign because when we did our Innsmouth run at Arkham Knights last year, Ben was playing Carson. So I've seen Carson in action in that sense. Dana, have you had some direct Carson experience?
Yeah, I did. I played Carson through the entirety of Dark Matter.
Okay.
As in sort of like a bless run, so not totally traditional, like straight up, but it was definitely still fun.
Well, I'm curious. Was that how big was the group in that run?
3 people.
Okay, yeah. Because the first thing, before we even get into like the strength and flaw and things, Carson seems like almost sort of like Carolyn, but maybe even more so. You really want to play him in a large group, like as large as possible. Like probably a very bad solo character, and probably even a pretty bad character in 2-player, right?
We should preface this by saying 0 out of 10 solo.
Yeah,
experience.
but potentially good in larger groups.
I'm sure, like,
Sure.
folks challenge themselves by being like, "I'm going to play Carson in solo," but
Yeah.
it would
Oh,
be
yeah.
a challenge. I don't know if anyone's
Yeah.
saying, "Oh no, he's a star in solo."
People will do it, but it's very much like playing Dark Souls is the whatever class it is. It starts with like nothing,
The
and has
wretch.
no gear,
Yeah,
exactly.
whatever.
It's
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of a jam, kind of. And yeah, so just right off the bat, as like a role, so. Often in the past, when we talk about what roles these investigators can play, we tell people don't build like a pure support deck. You kind of want to also be sort of good at other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
With Carson, you're kind of all in on support. You kind of don't really even have other options, I think. Is that more or less right?
I feel like that's been our view for a long time, right? Like we've
Yeah.
always, even though Min came out, we were always like air towards getting some clues and not being totally useless.
And to be fair, like that evolves as the card pool expands. Like there's more
Totally.
support cards now than there have been in the past, and certainly Carson has his own abilities that maybe make that viable. So it's kind of a different scenario. But yeah, he's definitely. I think it's hard to build him as anything other than like a pure support character.
He is pure support. You certainly could like try to really stack like some combat cards in from Guardian to like make it so he can fight stuff, but that's an uphill battle. I don't think leans into his strength.
When we did that Innsmouth run, I was playing Daryl, the best survivor in the game, and I couldn't really fight anything. So occasionally we'd have an enemy to deal with, and I would be like, "Can somebody help me with this?" And I would remember that Ben was playing a Guardian, and I would kind of glance over at Ben's side table, like, "Ben, is there any way you can deal with this?" And he would just say, "No, absolutely not." And after the first couple scenarios, I kind of learned. I was like, "Okay, it's not even really worth asking. It's not."
I probably said, "No, sir. I think you can handle it. I believe in you," or something
Yeah,
along
and
those lines.
I rolled my
Nice.
eyes and moved on with my life probably.
Or
But,
perhaps Mr. Cade will come and help.
Okay, so Ben, well, actually, both of you guys, what would you say is Carson's greatest strength compared to other characters you could have in your group?
I mean, it's nice that he can give everybody at the table extra action. He can definitely lean. There's little temptation to try to lean into like actually getting clues or fighting.
Okay,
So he could really do the full support of like I think I did a bunch of blessed nonsense to get blessed stuff to trigger, and I did a lot of support healing and like soaking damage. There's a lot of cards that existed, and even one that came out in this expansion that were like that soaked or block damage, and then a lot of skill cards that were like big commits to help people pass tests or get some type of good benefit from passing tests. So I guess with him, the idea is if he's on the table, he has to enable the other investigators to be like, if you're in like a 4-player group, they have to be like more than 33% better. Like he gives them an action plus makes their other actions even more valuable is the idea.
Yeah, that is basically my exact experience with Carson. I played him very much tons of soak and committing literally nothing to myself. Best part about playing him, the only tests you do are during the Mythos phase. Everything else is feeding other people money, cards, and actions, and that's it. And then you just stick on somebody with safeguard, and you just sit. It's great.
I mean, certainly, yeah. If you really hate drawing chaos tokens, this might be a good deck for you. But well, okay,
Yeah.
so kind of segueing over into greatest flaw and just kind of playing devil's advocate here. So Carson can make everyone else in the team better. Is that always better than just having another character that can actually do stuff in the group, though? Right? Like you've got this support character that gives everybody an extra action, but is that better than just having like a Tony Morgan or a Ursula Downs in your group?
I think it depends on your team comp. The comp we ran Arkham Knights, Daryl and Charlie and Carson all had stuff to like move instantly or follow each other around, so we were just a giant ball the whole time.
Cuddle puddle.
So he was always
Nice.
able to give at least 2 actions out every turn. And Kamani was like usually there, though sometimes they wandered off to do random nonsense on the other side of the map because they had a bunch of their own movement stuff. So
Yeah.
I think if you're doing a team where you're kind of grouped up a lot, he's very good. If you are a team that kind of wants to like spread out and people are like moving around and doing their own thing, then he's not going to be very helpful. So like if you're running like a Monty or an Ursula that's going to like run around the map, and he has to either chase them with safeguard and separate from the rest of the team, or just let them be them by themselves, that he's not going to be that strong in that scenario.
I think that's kind of my take on this is that like if you have the group set up right, which isn't that hard to do, and if you have like a 4-player group or maybe a 3-player group, and if someone who really knows what they're doing is building the Carson deck, which Ben I think made a lot of smart choices when we were in that group, he can basically be as good as having like another regular character in the team. And that alone, just because it's something different to try, like makes it worth trying because it's just kind of interesting. But I don't think, I don't know. It's hard for me to see where you would be like, oh man, we really need a Carson in this group because like that's going to, I don't know. I guess it can. It definitely made it feel like we could pay for stuff easier because you had motivational speeches and you had ever vigilance. It made us change our deck building decisions, which was kind of fun. It also made the scenarios, I feel like, take a little bit longer because like normally the thing that slows the game down is coordinating between players to kind of decide what to do, or at least the way we play. I think some people kind of skip that part, which is fine. So with Carson, you're kind of, everyone is helping everybody else, which is nice, but it also can mean that a turn takes 40 minutes.
Well, I mean, part of his thing is he enables investigators to go out of order, kind of, right? Because he can give out extra actions. So like if you have a scenario where it's like, somebody needs to evade this before I can do something, and you can be like, I give you an action to evade, and somebody else can have an action to attack it, or something like that, and it changes up the normal order of operations where you can like get one important action one important action done before you have to take your full turn, which then kind of enables some stuff. So,
which is powerful, but it also it's a more complicated decision to make at the start of the investigator phase.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight something real quick that you said, Dan. So I know we're talking about weaknesses right now, but one really cool strength is that you get to build your decks differently because Carson is only putting support cards in, only putting those like economy card draw engine stuff. So you can afford to make your deck really different and interesting if there's a Carson on your team. And there's almost nobody that doesn't want a Carson on their team in that, like, sure, I'll take extra actions. Sure, I'll take money and cards. Like, if that's all you're doing for the entire game, then why not, right? But that also gets into the issue of, like, those weird, messy scenarios where you're like, oh, Carson's engaged with an enemy and can't give us actions without taking AOs. So, we have to configure a way where, like Tony goes first and punches the thing off of him. And then, there's some weird stickiness that can happen there. And also Carson's really vulnerable if you don't have your assets down, or if you get hit by like a weird crypt chill at the wrong time or something like that. And your hunter's armor goes away. Now you're just going to get wrecked because, you're a 6/6 investigator who has 2 in every stat. Like what were you expecting?
So that's kind of following on that, Dana. Like the last thing I'll say about this, and again, this is still sort of devil's advocate because I swear I'm not trying to like hate on Carson, but I asked Ben when we were like near the end of that campaign, how much of the value of having Carson on the team was coming from like Carson's actual investigator card and abilities, and how much of it was coming from just playing all the good support cards like Stand Together and Upgraded Ever Vigilant and Gearish and all these other good cards. Like, could you just roll up like a Mark or a Roland deck or something and just play more support cards than a typical Guardian does and be like almost as good at support as Carson, but also be able to fight stuff when you really need to? Like that's I'm still kind of wondering that because I'm not sure how much of this is like Carson is great and how much of it is just there are a lot of good support cards now and you actually can make a support deck.
I think if you're trying to make a support deck with other investigators, you're taking away the benefits of some of their abilities. Like if you're playing Mark and you're trying to play a bunch more support, it might be harder to actually murder stuff, have actions to murder stuff. And
I mean, you'd still be Mark.
We would still be Mark, so you would draw lots of cards. But I don't know. You certainly could build another support investigator. It's just like it feels not as I don't know. It feels like it feels more forced. It'd be like playing Carson trying to fight stuff. It's a
little bit more like try hard min maxing and maybe less fun or less interesting. I would definitely concede that.
Yeah. So I had actually tracked the number of actions that I had given away every scenario with dice. Every time I so I was playing with a Tommy and his sister Mary, and on average there was between 13 and 19 actions given to each of the investigators in every scenario, which is a ridiculous amount of actions. But that is also including things like Ever Vigilant level 4, Stand Together cards, motivational speeches and things like that. So it's maybe a little bit more skewed towards like the 10 to 15 range or something like that. Even still, that feels like a lot of value. For a investigator, I never felt like I was in a terrible amount of like concerning straits with, like there was always somebody who was able to peel an enemy off of me, and then I'd be able to like give somebody an action and shortcut in with that action that they used, which was always a neat thing. But yeah.
One more really quick question. Is his weakness actually bad at all? It kind of seems more or less harmless. Like it's annoying that you can't ever really completely get rid of it, but it kind of, you're usually committing cards to people. It feels like even if it does trigger, it's like one horror and you probably have a ton of stuff to soak it.
Yeah,
kind of.
it's annoying in that, like, oh, it's a dead draw and you draw it a bunch of times
and you have to remember it. Yeah.
Because it shuffles back in. Yeah,
it shuffles back in if you don't do it. But yeah, you might stick at it. Probably stays out a couple turns, then it eventually goes away. I don't remember it being that. I remember it being mildly annoying, not like a terrible weakness, not like a windy weakness or whatever.
That sounds right.
And his signature card is nice too, because that's it's a 3 commit symbol and it draws a card for somebody too, which is nice. So
yeah.
I guess the one thing we haven't mentioned yet is like he's maybe we'll talk more about like cards that he likes, but he gets to choose Seeker, Mystic, or Survivor too, which gives him a couple different ways he can build, because those each have their own set of like support cards.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
You might want.
Yeah, and especially like I feel like if you're going pure support, I feel like Mystic would be fun. Like I guess you couldn't get the good ward, but you could get some sort of like wardy things and things like that might be good.
Yeah.
Segueing over into talking about cards, so favorite cards, the one that we've already talked about that seemed pretty essential is Safeguard.
Yep.
There's also, because you want to stay on top of people to be helping them. Right. We also talked about various support cards like Ever Vigilant, Motivational Speech, Stand Together, and any other really good Carson cards we should mention. I
liked Garish, who's the new ally that came out.
Garish.
He like soaks damage and horror and
helps people pass tests.
And gives skill boost and heals himself when like he gives the skill boost. So
I am willing to say he is one of the best allies in the game now. Just straight up. He was ridiculously good.
It seems very good.
He turned out a lot better than I was expecting.
Right, me too. Yeah.
I mean, he certainly could fit into other decks, but I think for Carson, because he's already trying to like do health soak stuff and boost other people's skills, it like fits very nicely in for him.
Right. It's almost like committing 2 things if you get to use Girish and also commit something to somebody, and then you're just boosting the stat by 5 or something like that ridiculous. So he was fantastic. Yeah.
I think the bottom line is like assume that you're always going to be on other people's locations, and assume that you're never going to pass any tests. It's like choose cards based on those things. So like any card that kind of gives people money or heals people or helps other people do stuff probably is going to be worth playing. And any card that lets you fight something or try to get a clue by doing a test, probably you don't want to play it.
Yeah. He also needs a lot of soak because you are not passing any treacheries effectively. Like you are if you get hit with the Rotting Remains or Grasping Hands or whatever, you're just going to take 1 to 3 damage. Like good luck, And so like Hunter's
Luckily,
Armor
Guardians
for that
do have
reason,
a lot of options for that.
Hunter's Armor was incredible in addition to Garish. Hunter's Armor, every time I drew my weakness, it was like, oh great, this is just a card for me because I did a Hex Drinker upgrade. So every time it takes a horror, you tap it and then draw a card, right? Hallowed Mirror, obviously, the Obsidian Bangle or Bracelet or whatever I used for until I was able to get Girish and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the deck I did Arkham Knights, I went subclass Survivor, so I leaned very hard into Blessed Tech nonsense. So that's definitely an option when you go Survivor. Right. I think what subclass were you when you played it, Dana?
I played Survivor because of exactly the same reason. Exactly the same reason.
But Mystic has things like he can get delves or wards or stuff to deal with the encounter deck.
He seems like the ideal person to play delves because he's just going to have actions to do it. So I feel like if I didn't have a strong reason to go another way, and I would probably not consider blessed tokens to qualify for that, I would probably go Mystic just to be like, okay, I'll be the delver in the group,
Yeah, there's definitely one really interesting Carson build that I haven't tried yet, but I saw, and I remember building something pretty similar to it when the set came out, hinging off of the card Bestow Resolve, which effectively just changes all of the icons on one card to all wilds. So if you have something like Inspiring Presence that has 3 different ones on it, it morphs them to all wilds. So instead of committing for 1 of some symbol, it commits for 3. And this specific deck has a way to get 14 cards that have 4 wilds on them, technically. And it's with Mystic cards, it's with like all of the Desperate cards. In addition, you can run like Promise of Power and Occult Theories to get to this ridiculous threshold of boosting by 4 pretty much for every single test as long as you have Bestow Resolves out. So I think Bestow Resolve in that build with Mystic cards is a very strong Carson build in terms of if you're going into like hard mode or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that deck did seem pretty bonkers. So there's definitely a lot of options for him. whichever way you go, I think you can be useful in being a support and contributing. So contributing by being a old man butler cheerleader, basically. So yeah.
You also get to say "as you wish," as said in The Princess Bride many times.
There you go. Yep.
So for the movie that Carson could star in, so Ben I think sometimes takes a relatively literal view when we're choosing movies. So Ben was all in favor of choosing the movie The Butler. But
I wanted to do Clue, which also stars the butler, but neither one of these butlers lined up with Carson very well.
I think I managed to sway us over to Gosford Park, which is a really good Altman movie about a murder at a fancy English manor that has a lot of butlers and maidservants and manservants and valets and things of that nature. Very, very good movie. Definitely recommend people check it out. If you want to get a sense of what butlering would have been like, I think you can get a sense of it from that film.
From the premise that you told me, it sounded like it was very much a proto-Knives Out sort of movie. So folks who like Knives Out would probably like that? Is that right?
It's like an old school whodunit, right? Isn't it like a 1930s movie?
So compared to Knives Out, it's it came out in 2002, but it's set in the early 30s.
Oh.
Compared to Knives Out, I would say it's less mystery focused, although it does have a mystery in it, and it's more sort of about the characters and their relationships. I would say it's two to three times better than Knives Out, and I like Knives Out. But,
wow.
Draw your own conclusions, folks.
I definitely thought you said this movie was from like the 1930s. I was like,
me too.
Okay. So it's
like
a silent
black
and white movie about a butler. All right, Dan.
So fun random fact. This is actually the movie that Downton Abbey is kind of like a spin-off of.
Oh.
They were going to make a TV show based on this movie. Because I think what's her name, Maggie Smith is in this movie, and she's also in Downton Abbey. And they ended up changing the characters' names, but making like a similar style of show, but changing the tone of it to be a little bit more of like a soap opera kind of thing, and setting it like 10 years earlier. So there's a connection between the two.
Interesting. Well, why don't we move on to our Seeker?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is, Seekers obviously are always a great time. This guy is a little bit of an unusual Seeker though. So we have Vincent Lee, the Doctor. So he has 3 willpower, 4 intellect, 3 combat, 1 agility. He's a medic. He has a reaction after one of your card effects heals damage from an investigator or an investigator's ally asset. Add one of your set aside on the men skills to that investigator's hand. Elder Sign effect +1. You may heal 1 damage from an investigator or ally asset at your location. And he has 9 health, 6 sanity. For deck building, 30 cards. You get Seeker cards 0 to 3. So this is one of those sort of Finn type situations where he doesn't sort of get all the cards from his own class. Neutral 0 to 5. Cards that heal damage 0 to 5. Up to 15 other Guardian or Survivor cards level 0 to 1. So very, very Finn-like, I guess, right?
This is the Carolyn deck building, right? Exactly.
Kind of a mix of...
No.
Carolyn get 0 to 5, only not firearms or something for Guardian. I don't know. It's similar to Carolyn. So his unique asset, or his unique card, signature card is called Bonesaw. It's a very terrifying card. It's a hand asset, item, tool, melee, cost 3, has intellect, combat, and wild icons on it. It says action fight. You get +2 for this attack. If it's successful, take 1 damage to deal +1 damage for this attack. An action, heal 5 damage from investigator or location. Oh, that sounds good. Test, intellect 4. If you fail, that investigator suffers 1 physical trauma, max once per game. Well, that's pretty frightening.
Except for the last scenario.
The on the men cards that people get when you heal them are basically just unexpected courages. They're just skills with 2 question marks on them.
Yeah.
And then his weakness is wounded bystander, which is an ally. It's health 5. Put it into play in your threat area with 3 damage on it, or in your play area with 3 damage on it. It cannot leave play while it has damage unless it's defeated. If it has no damage, discard it. When you take non-direct damage, at least 1 of it must be assigned to Wounded Bystander if able, and if it's defeated, you suffer a mental trauma. So you kind of have to heal it up and save it, or else if it dies, you will take a mental trauma. So that's would be kind of bad if that happened, considering he starts with 6 sanity.
He's your BFF. Gotta keep him alive.
So Ben played this. We did a 2-player run through Cyclopean Foundations earlier, which was very fun. And I played Mark Harrigan and Ben played Vincent, and it was a great team. It worked really well. Obviously, the Mark's ability and the healing thing synced up really well. So Vincent seems really good. What do you guys think about Vincent?
Yeah, I think he's strong. Similar to Carolyn, he He can heal while also getting clues. He could fight theoretically if he was ever allowed to play Bonesaw, but sometimes he's with a partner who's like really terrified of that being on the board.
It's much safer if the Bonesaw just doesn't even come out onto the table. Is how a lot of people feel about it. Because if you think about it, it's impossible for anyone to get a trauma from the Bonesaw if the Bonesaw just gets committed, right? It's only if you play it that there's even the possibility of horrible trauma happening.
But then you can't quote Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Well, you could. It just wouldn't be as appropriate, I guess. But
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I had a good time playing him. I think I found that it was harder. Maybe it was just the team we were playing. It was harder for me to give you on the mends because there were less cards that were like passive healing for you that for other people. I mean, I did like bandages, which was pretty good. You also hated having cards in your hand because every time I gave you it on the mend, you had like, oh, Mark, I have 17 cards already. I'm going to discard this. And like, okay,
well,
cool.
that was the thing. Mark already has 1 million cards in hand, and he doesn't really need an extra unexpected courage that much because he kind of has a button that does unexpected courage.
Right.
But I will say, I mean, having Vincent on the team did let Mark think about his dearly departed life partner Sophie a lot more frequently, which just made Mark even more busted. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do think, well, okay, so let's compare Vincent to Carolyn just briefly. I would say that there are somewhat more ways in the game to like incidentally take horror for doing something and get a benefit out of it than damage, maybe. Like it's kind of borderline now, but for damage, you mostly think about Mark. And for horror, I feel like there's just a lot of other cards out there that you can kind of benefit from. Is that sort of right?
A lot of the Mystic cards do horror. Like this, like, Fruit of Knowledge.
Yeah.
Agnes by herself. I guess Parallel Agnes takes damage, but...
Parallel Agnes is the other really, really good pairing.
Vincent and Parallel Agnes would be good. But on the other hand, so if Carolyn basically gives someone a resource when she heals their sanity. Vincent basically gives people an unexpected courage, like a one-use unexpected courage. That wasn't super great for Mark in this team, but it might be pretty strong. In a lot of situations, like hard mode, it might be better than getting a resource, right?
Potentially. Yeah. I also think Vincent benefited a lot from healing himself and having the unexpected courage, because that's kind of what enabled Vincent to pass tests.
Well, that's the thing is your main, you also had the Dream Diary. See, your main healing engine was Jessica, right? And we used Solemn Vow, kind of instead of, much like we would do with Carolyn and Peter, like instead of you healing Mark, mostly we were just using Solemn Vow to shove the damage onto Jessica, and then you always had On the Mend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which
I guess that's kind of a weakness with Vincent, is he does have his stat line's okay. I mean, he's 4 int still. It's still good for clues, but that can make it harder to pass higher level tests, as well as like on hard mode. That's not going to cut it by itself. So he really does need card support to boost his stats, either through money, he could do like higher education or whatever, but because he already has an engine for giving himself unexpected courages, I think I leaned more into skill card stuff like Dream Diary and Grizzly Totem. I
do wish his stat line was a little different, because he has I never like to see a 3 in combat or intellect, right? A 3 just always feels like not quite good enough to really do it, but sort of high enough that it's like, could we reallocate those points somewhere? Because I think the idea with him is, especially if you're in a smaller group, you can drop the bone saw and do a little bit of fighting, but I mean, he's only at a 3. He's not going to be super good at it, right?
He has access to Guardian, Survivor, some Survivor cards, so he can pull some stuff from there to get actual weapons if he wanted, or get boosts. He could get a little bit of boost out of Guardian, but it is harder out of the gate for him to be a main primary fighter. So
I ran him through Scarlet Keys with Carolyn as the primary fighter.
Okay, how did it go?
It went really well. He was very, very fun to play. So Runic Axe is one of the customizable cards, and if you upgrade into the thing that heals damage or horror when you kill things, you can upgrade it to level 5. So that's what I wanted to do. So I went with a fully geared up Runic Axe. I figured you're already going to get Jess. Fantastic synergy there. I ran Bandages with Surgical Kit, which was fantastic because every time you heal a damage, you'd heal 2 instead. So it's accruing that value passively. And things like Scientific Theory and Mind Over Matter level 2, just played out really well. and I used practice makes perfects with vicious blows, overpowers, and plans of actions to get like the stat boost. But it was definitely not something that I would take into hard mode or expert because of that exact reason. Like starting with a 3 is rough, and in normal it's pretty fine, okay to do that.
Okay.
But in higher difficulties, it was like I don't see that working as well as it did.
It does. It sounds like a really fun deck for standard, though.
It was quite fun.
So would you say, like with Carolyn, I think we would say her role is like a mix of clues and support. It almost sounds like with Vincent, you do like a mix of support and sort of either clues or fighting, or maybe a little bit of all three. I don't know.
Yeah, I think definitely more reliable on the clue front in terms of like going into hard and expert, probably. But yeah.
Yeah. If you're playing on hard, maybe you go for more like support and clues or something.
Yeah, Carolyn doesn't really have a strong combat option. I mean, I guess she could do something with mystic spells or something, but it's harder for her to get online, I think.
We should also briefly mention for strengths, secret cards. Obviously, it's boring, but you got to say it.
Yeah.
Is his weakness? His weakness mostly seemed to not matter very much when I was playing with Ben.
Yeah, it's kind of because they provided a card that's a level 0 card that instantly heals his weakness. The name I'm forgetting, but it's one of the, you drop a clue and you heal.
Bizarre diagnosis.
Yeah. One of the cooler names.
But you mostly didn't even really care about that, though.
Yeah, and also because he has access to like bandages and other soak things, like even Jessica, I believe. When a bystander only takes the whenever you take non-direct damage, you have to put it on, so you can't put it on Jessica, but you have enough like passive healing that you can like keep it like half alive and it probably won't die.
Yeah, it seemed like it wasn't, and the absolute worst case, like, okay, so you don't want to take a mental trauma off of it, but if that happens like once over the course of the game, it's probably not the end of the world.
Not a big deal. Yeah.
Okay. So any other weaknesses for Vincent? I mean, I think sort of just like having, again, if you're trying to play like a really optimized group for like hard or expert, I think just not having a 5 in anything is like sort of a weakness, and not having level 5 secret cards is maybe like a little bit of a weakness. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it feels like maybe if you were doing that, you'd want him to be more of like a secondary cluer, like support kind of, like healing all the damage and horror off the -5 you're never going to draw and stuff like that, and then sort of picking up some clues where he can.
I think you could definitely play him on hard in like Forgotten Age or Scarlet Keys, where there seems to be a lot of damage flying around. Like I think you'll find occasions to use where his ability will be good, right?
Oh, yeah. Always have a doctor in the jungle.
By giving everyone else on the mends, like those are good and hard, right? So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Free on the mends almost every turn if you're using bandages and stuff like that is great.
We should probably mention that he has 1 agility, right? That is a weakness.
That is technically his Achilles heel.
The thing is, I guess agility tests often deal damage as a penalty. There's definitely other penalties, but it kind of balances out there because he like has ways to heal himself. But there's sometimes encounter cards that are like that aren't damage, and it's like discard cards or lose resources or whatever if you fail agility tests. And
right.
Means he wants to pass it. He's got to commit a bunch, or just accept that he's going to fail agility tests.
Yeah,
that sounds right. Favorite cards for Vincent? We've talked about a lot of them, like Jessica, bandages, basically the good damage healing cards.
Passive damage healing cards, right?
And just secret cards in general, your classic Pathfinders and shortcuts and crack the cases. Like, obviously play crack the case. Even if you're not getting clues, you're just going to be able to do it. So,
right.
Any other really, really top-notch Vincent cards?
I think we already mentioned them all.
Surgical Kit. We did. Surgical Kit. Yeah, Surgical Kit's fantastic.
So for a movie for Vincent, we chose, I think, probably Ben's favorite movie of all time is my guess. A movie that Ben has been wanting to choose for basically every investigator for years now, and he finally gets his chance. Ben,
I don't think that's correct, Sad. But...
Ben, tell us about the greatest movie ever made, in your opinion, that we chose for Vincent.
So we're trying to find a movie that's about a doctor that like deals with occult stuff, and there was one movie that we could think of, and it's the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe's a movie starring I don't remember his name.
Benedict
the guy from Sherlock.
Smaug himself.
Yeah, Smaug himself, Doctor Strange, which is about an arrogant doctor guy who has to deal with magic nonsense. Which I guess Vincent Lee does actually know actual magic, but he is a doctor guy that deals with occult nonsense through the game. So I guess we couldn't think of a single other movie that started an arrogant doctor. Is Vincent Lee even arrogant? I don't know.
I did see this movie in the theater. I mentioned earlier that Ben sometimes wants to go a little bit literal with these. Vincent Lee is a strange doctor, right? So it kind of makes sense.
Can make some bizarre diagnoses from time to time.
And that movie has some fun, weird graphical effects. Got hands on hands on hands on hands.
Some of that stuff was interesting.
Yeah.
Criminal misuse of Mads Mikkelsen just really didn't give him anything interesting to do.
Yeah,
pretty
I
sad.
in that movie.
It's true.
Yeah,
but...
and Tilda Swinton for that matter, but whatever. It's not the only MCU movie that just gets one of the best actors in the world and then just doesn't really do anything with them. So it's kind of par for the course.
All right.
Anything else to say about Vincent, or should we move on?
No, I think he's a good time.
Good fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Good time.
Yeah. So the rogue in Scarlet Keys is Kaimani Jones. They are a security consultant. They have 3 will, 2 intellect, 2 combat, and 5 agility. They're a criminal. Their ability is fast action. Engage an exhausted enemy at your location. Seems bad. Well, also as a reaction, when you attempt to evade an exhausted non-elite enemy, add your int to your skill value for this attempt. If you succeed by at least X, discard that enemy. X is that enemy's remaining health. And then Elder Sign effect +1. If there's an exhausted enemy at your location, you automatically succeed instead, which is kind of meh. 8 health, 6 sanity. Their deck building options: rogue cards level 0 to 5, tool cards level 0 to 4, neutral cards level 0 to 5, and then they begin the game with 5 additional bonus experience, sort of like Parallel Roland and Mateo.
Do you want to talk about their signature cards quick?
Yeah, so their signature card is Grappling Hook. It is an item and a tool. It takes up a hand slot. It costs 3 to play. It has an intellect, an agility, and a wild symbol on it. And it says, action performed using Grappling Hook do not provoke attacks of opportunity. And then as a double action, exhaust Grappling Hook, take up to 3 different basic actions from the following list in any order: engage, evade, investigate, or move. If you investigate, use your agility instead of your intellect. And then their weakness is called Agent Fletcher. It is a humanoid coterie detective who has 2 fight, 3 health, 3 evade, does 1 damage and 1 horror, has alert and hunter, prey Kaimani Jones only. While Kaimani Jones is evading, Agent Fletcher reduce their intellect value to 0. So yeah. Kaimani's been really interesting as the rogue entry. I immediately see 5 sweet experience and, want to immediately play them. And, they got a 5 in a stat, which is good. They're the rogues, one of the rogues with the highest will, which was pretty shocking and exciting for people to see.
Yeah.
And the ability to delete enemies is really cool and really interesting, very different, sort of like a waylay effect.
Yeah, it is really interesting that they have the same 5 bonus XP as Mateo, but they seem to not have... I want to be sensitive about this. They seem to not suck quite as hard at Mateo in every other way. So that's kind of interesting.
At least not out of the gate. Mateo's got a little bit got better. There's been a lot more cards out of the pool that he can grab.
But I mean, like if Mateo had 5 willpower, we'd be having a different conversation about Mateo. Kaimani has a 5 in agility, right? So that's that's a big difference.
Yeah, the Kaimani they're definitely interesting. They have a kind of a way to deal with enemies and actually get them off the board that we haven't seen before. Like, obviously there's people that couldn't be able to evade before and maybe could play waylay or whatever, but
right.
most of the time evading does not get an enemy off the board. It just kind of delays it for a turn or makes
as has often been coming up when we've been playing cards like exploit whatever it is and waylay in Scarlet Keys, if you discard an enemy that has victory on it, you do not get the victory. It does not go to the victory display.
Yeah,
most of the time that doesn't matter because there's a lot of correlation between having victory and being elite, but you will be very annoyed by that weird rules quirk when you're playing Kaimani sometimes.
I mean, strengths is they can deal with enemies but just through evading and using their evasion, but a weakness is they can't deal with victory enemies in a way that gets you the victory. Right?
Yeah.
Without having to pack a bunch of other stuff into their deck that doesn't synergize as well with their ability. So
I mean, you could play the bow or the hyper physical shot caster or something and be able to fight stuff, but it might not be the best fit with what the other stuff they're doing.
Yeah, which is good as I mean, there's usually not that many victory or elite enemies, but.
So before we even talk about strengths and weaknesses, what role does Kaimani play exactly? Because I mean, certainly they can evade stuff, right? But we usually
Yeah.
don't think of that as being a role in and of itself. Like, is their ability to kind of, poof things away, is that good enough that Kimani can be your primary enemy handler? Or can Kimani do like a half of enemy handling and get some clues, even though they only have 2 agility, or 2 intellect? Like, what are we talking about here?
I think they're like a very strong like secondary enemy handler because they can deal with anything that's not elite, basically, or not victory. If you care about victory, I mean, I guess if you're not as worried about the victory, you can just evade
If
stuff,
you care about victory, come on. Like, what? I mean, I guess if it's the last scenario of the game.
Rogues do kind of care about victory because all of their
What cast
good
is this?
cards
Yeah.
are a lot. They're very expensive. So it's hard for them there to be the enemy handler. We mentioned they could add cards to their deck that like let them deal with it, but that doesn't really synergize with their ability too much or their stats. So that makes it a little bit harder sell. They have access to all the tool cards, which a lot of those are helpful for fighting or helpful for getting clues. But also, was this the one where a lot of the tools were also? No, that's Amina with Mystics and Sharps.
No, we're not there yet. We're almost there.
There's tools that are like Seeker and Survivor that they can pull in, which can make.
Importantly, they also only have 2 hands, right? Like, that's what seems kind of weird about this is like, suppose you want to play the grappling hook, you maybe also want to play like lockpicks or something to get clues. Maybe you want to play some kind of weapon or something to fight stuff. You're going to run out of hand slots pretty fast, I think, right? Like, is that considered a flaw for Kimani, or does that not matter as much?
The grappling hook I wasn't too impressed with when in the one we did. They ended up using other tools.
It seems fun. Like it seems like a fun mini game to try to use it correctly each turn. But yeah, I'm not sure how great it is.
It's rough because it only lets you take basic actions, right? And they all have to be different ones. So that can be pretty tough. I mean, they could do like an engage, evade, move combo pretty easily, or get investigate in there. But
yeah, no, I mean, but like that's the thing is you never want to do a basic investigate with Kimani, right? I mean, maybe if you have a lot of setup going on, but
here with the grappling hook, it lets you use your agility for that investigate.
Oh, okay,
that's the big thing.
That's true.
Yes.
But it wouldn't let you like trigger a tool that give you a bonus or whatever.
But that makes sense. So maybe you don't need lockpicks as much. Maybe you kind of
right.
you play one in case you don't draw the grappling hook, but like you're kind of okay.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, Kimani has been consistently good at like running interference and like sort of picking up enemies and deleting them, and then flying off with their grappling hook and picking up a clue here or there. They've been incredible at doing that, and it looks very, very fun.
I'm really annoyed that you have to exhaust the grappling hook when you use it, because I feel like it would be incredibly fun to play Leo and do like double grappling hook turns. It's too bad you can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way you can do that. No, you're right.
Not really. I mean, maybe some really bizarre way, but well, okay. So strengths for Kimani, like great at evading stuff, and again, the ability to kind of like just make stuff go away by evading it twice. That's not always going to be great. You're not going to want to use it on victory enemies. Some things are really hard to evade or whatever, but like there's going to be times, and it is 2 actions to get rid of something, whereas if you just shoot something and commit a vicious blow, maybe you could just kill it in one hit. But there's definitely cases where this is like a pretty good way to handle stuff. So that's a strength. And I feel like, just having 5 in agility, like we sometimes say it's like the worst stat, but there's a lot you can do with it these days. Like having a 5 in it is pretty good.
There's a lot of ways to use your agility now in the rogue card pool to get clues or to fight. So in olden times of the ancient past, there wasn't as many options. So it was like,
the forgotten age,
that's it. Say. But now these days, there's definitely way more things to do.
Oh yeah. A lot of tricks and a lot of tools, right? You got lockpicks, you've got thieves kit, you've got pilfers, so many different things that are converting agility over that it's just super, super useful for them.
And honestly, like we already mentioned, having a 3 willpower is, I mean, again, like for a rogue, that's pretty good, right? That's like almost
right?
unheard of. So
they can actually drink booze and then maybe just stop
I mean, it's you almost don't need it because you can you handle this one everything. But yeah, it's nice.
Right.
You could probably make it happen.
You could pass test occasionally, and the 2/2 in int and combat is normally like that's why not just make it a 1 type of situation. But because they're in rogue and they have a bunch of things that's like, oh, add this to your agility. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's like a +2 when I use these cards. So that's like fine.
Yeah, like you would actually maybe want to play like Lola Santiago because it would boost your agility, and you could use it, and it would also boost the intellect would matter when you're doing the like poof evade thing, the second evade.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
There are also there's a lot of just cool, interesting stuff you can do with that free action with the free lightning bolt to engage an exhausted enemy or location. Like there are times where you want to like evade something and then drag it somewhere. It's kind of interesting that you can do that with Kimani basically for free.
Yes.
And that might just unlock some like weird combos and things you can do. So I guess they can't play exploit. Is it exploit weakness? I can't remember the name of it.
Yes.
Or exploit, but like they can't play that. But that sort of thing where you kind of like want to evade something twice for some reason, like that just unlocks some weird possibilities.
Yeah, they can deal with a weird amount of enemies in a great way, right? Like there's like Apex Stranglevine and like Basilisks that have like 4 to 6 health that are not technically elite, but just deleting them for 1 to 2 actions is super helpful for a team.
Yeah, the Stranglevine especially is like that's like the perfect thing to use Kimani's ability on.
Yeah, totally.
Should we talk about favorite cards? We've talked about a bunch, but it's sort of like ways to use the agility, standard good rogue things like Leo or Faustine Bargain, things like that. Anything else that's like particularly good for Kimani?
Yeah.
Stealth, right? Stealth 2 is very good.
Stealth 3 is their card.
Or Stealth 3.
Right. It was made for them.
It gives them an extra way to evade every turn for free and at reduced difficulty. Very good.
Huge.
Oh, and so pickpocketing 2 also, right?
Pickpocketing 2 is obviously very good for generating money. The whole trick suite can be good for them too. Like all the cards that like add your agility to do something, and if you pass by enough, you get stuff back.
And if you do want to fight stuff, like if you're in a 2-player group or something, then maybe the Shotcaster, because like that's sort of an easy way to leverage your agility to do stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah. The other thing, like you were saying that they might run out of hands and or accessory slots. Hidden Pocket, I'll take that, is something that is available for rogues now, which means that you can get 2 cigarette cases down at once pretty easily if you got like, a trench coat or something down.
I'll take that. Lets you like convert something into an illicit card, and Hidden Pocket like can hold illicit cards. So I think that's what Kim was running that in our Arkham Knights run, so she was able to hold like the multi-tool and the Shotcaster and like the grappling hook or whatever at the same time.
Isn't there some new like tool belt thing that lets you sort of like swap hand things in and out?
Yeah, she also had a tool belt.
It seemed kind of clunky, but like you might
rogues don't need that.
This
they
seems
just got
like
all the pockets.
if you were going to play that card, this is maybe the kind of deck you would try to. Yeah.
You need something to put the Hidden Pocket on, so you need clothing armor.
Sure.
So
you can use like trench coat or leather jacket or whatever. Leather coat.
Okay.
There's different options. So
yeah.
Any other special cards for Kimani?
There's different. I think they can work with like a bunch of different rogue suites, but I think the stealth 3 as mentioned already, pickpocketing are like pretty important. So
yeah, Kimani feels the most like a mystic than any other investigator has ever felt, because they care so much about their agility over everything else. And rogues are sort of in a weird place now where they can actually start doing that with like, a suite of lockpicks and thieves kits and pilfers and things like that. They can make their agility go the distance. And it's also a defensive stat, right? So it's not bad.
Okay, that makes sense. So for the movie that we picked for Kimani, so their whole deal is that they're secretly a thief that steals stuff, but with the aim of returning priceless artifacts to their rightful owners, which is cool. So we chose because we've already picked the other 2 Indiana Jones movies for other characters. We picked Temple of Doom because the whole thing Indy's trying to do in that movie is to return the Sankara stones to the village from which they were stolen. So pretty great movie, and kind of a good fit for Kimani.
I assumed there had to be a movie where like somebody like robs a museum to like return the artifacts back to their owners, but we failed to find one.
Well, you love Marvel movies. Can you remember the Marvel movie where that sort of happened at the beginning? Come on, Ben.
Marvel? Is there a heist? Does Ant-Man do a heist or something?
Black Panther.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There's also several Jackie Chan movies that are kind of about this.
Get rid of Indiana Jones.
Mostly not
Black
good.
Panther
So,
now.
Yeah, so we picked Temple of Doom. Come on.
It's a good movie.
Let's move on to our next investigator.
All right, that means it's Mystic time. It's time for Amina Zidane. I think is how you say her last name. I should look this up ahead of time. But yeah, she's the operator. She's a new to Arkham investigator, as was Kimani. She has 3s in all her stats. She's chosen and cursed. Her ability is reaction when you play an asset, reduce its resource cost by 3, and enters play with 1 Doom on it, once per round. Elder Sign effect, +2. You may move all Doom from a card at your location to another card at your location. Deck building is deck size 30. I think all these guys are deck size 30, right? Mystic cards 0 to 5, neutral 0 to 5, and charm cards 0 to 4. Her deck building is she has Word of Woe and Word of Wheel and Deafening Silence as her weakness, plus the usual random basic weakness. So Word of Woe and Word of Wheel are like a pair of events that kind of play off of each other. Word of Woe is cost 2. It's fast. You play it only in your turn. You can place a Doom on an asset you control to resolve an action ability on it, ignoring all costs, including the action cost. Then, if Word of Wheel is in your discard pile, you can shuffle it back in your deck. And Word of Wheel is cost 0. Fast when you perform a skill test on an asset with 1 or more Doom on it. Add your will to your skill test value for this test. And then if Word of Woe is in your discard pile, shuffle it back in. So like when you play one, you can kind of get the other one back in your deck. And then Deafening Silence says, move 1 Doom from an asset you control to the current agenda. That sounds very bad. This may cause the current agenda to advance. Oh, that is bad. If no Doom is moved, shuffle it back, Deafening Silence back into your deck. Oh, and there's some spooky text on the bottom that's impossible to read. Yeah, this is the toughest one, I think, for us to crack into here. And also the one I think we have the least experience on as a group. I played her in Fortune or Folly at Arkham Knights. She was okay. Have either of you done anything with her yet?
I gotta be honest. When I see when I see the Jenny stat line, I turn around and I run in the other direction. Like this is not where you want to be, folks. I'm sorry.
Especially on a Mystic, right? Like Mystics need 1 stat.
The best Mystic stat line would be like 8-1-1-1. Like that would be literally the best Mystic stat you could possibly have. Like 5-1-1-1 would be better than this stat line.
This is tough for a lot of reasons. I know, so I guess somebody who has a similar stat line would be Diana, right? Who starts with 1-3-3-3 and can eventually get up to, like 6 or whatever. Yep. But like, this is such an odd place to be. And as far as I can tell, they can sort of operate as a Mystic. Eventually, once you upgrade your spells enough, you get, the inherent plus bonus to will, so it's not that big of a deal. You have, rosaries and stuff to like help boost your will there too. But I also don't have much experience with Amina. I tried really hard to make decks for her and got frustrated and threw it away.
Her idea is that she can play with Doom, which we've seen before with like Marie and a little bit, all these Mystic cards that deal with Doom. So she's supposed to be able to benefit from like moving Doom around and triggering stuff. The thing is, before this expansion, there wasn't very many cards that had Doom on them that also had an action ability, which is important for her event cards to be able to trigger off.
And the new ones don't really seem good enough to like amazing enough to kind of really motivate you to play Amina, kind of.
They're weird because they give action compression, but it's not action compression that you necessarily like as much. Like it's the fight card, like I don't remember off. It's also just like cards like move and fight or engage and fight and do 1 damage. But
and having Doom on your stuff. Look, we play Arcane Initiate a lot. We play David Renfield a lot. Like we're comfortable with it if you're getting a payoff that's worth it, right? And especially those are allies, so they're kind of easier to kill if things do go wrong and you're about to advance. You can there's usually ways to like quickly let them die. But right. I mean, having Doom on your stuff is a pretty big liability, especially if it's on an asset that doesn't have health and sanity that you can sort of easily kill it that way, right? Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like, like when you look at her ability, okay, so saving $3 to play an asset is sort of good, but like, what if you just have enough money? Like, what if you can get money other ways? You could be Dexter and you could play Faustian bargains and stuff like that.
I mean, one of her pros is she's not really worried about resources for playing assets. She
exactly.
Can get her assets
yes.
out.
Yeah, that's fair.
She needs 0 resource cards in her deck. She can
that's definitely good, because I think Mystics still mostly struggle with resources. I want to say that, but
so mystics have like a high floor in terms of how much money they need because they have to play assets that are kind of pricey, but they don't really have any like money sinks. They don't have anything like, Streetwise or Higher Ed that they can just dump money into. So like once you have enough money to play your stuff as a mystic, you really don't need more. You can't really do anything with it.
Which when I was playing her, I was like, man, I really wish I had a money sink.
You wish Blood Pact worked.
I was like, can I have a money version of Blood Pact, please? I mean, there's there's like the composure cards, but
that's the one. That's the one that I would consider playing with her. Totally.
So we're kind of talking mostly about our weaknesses. Do we want to focus on our strengths and roll first?
Let's enumerate some flaws for Armenia, and let's be reasonable but unsparing here. So the stat line isn't great.
Yeah.
You don't really want 3s and everything, right?
Yeah, it's okay. Like having 3s in defensive stats is kind of okay, right? Like it's better than a 2 or a 1.
But one of those defensive stats is an offensive stat for Mystics.
It's kind of rough.
Yes.
It's kind of rough in Jenny, but at least with Jenny, you can say like, okay, well, she's going to like spend a lot of money to boost them and things. I'm going to do like a fun solo Jenny deck. With Amina, like she's just in the class where you really just want crazy will and nothing else.
Right.
Yeah. I think also, we haven't mentioned this yet, but her weakness card is very, very bad.
Oh,
it's kind of like in Ancient Evils that like it just keeps getting shuffled back if you don't have Doom on your assets. Like eventually, it's probably gonna give you an extra Doom.
Yes,
it'll continue to whiff if you're not playing with Doom on the board. Amina, what are you
doesn't
doing with
do
Amina,
anything,
right?
So. Exactly. Yes.
Agnes's weakness in the worst case might give you a Doom, and we've said that's like a big downside for Agnes.
Oh yeah, her weakness is awful.
It is very bad, but you can often play around it, and you can even benefit from it in some corner cases.
Mm-hmm. Right, and Survivor allows you ways to mitigate it.
Yeah, and with Agnes, like you get really powerful abilities and great stats to compensate for that really bad, and card pool to compensate for that weakness. With Amina, it's like it's strange that like Marie is the other investigator that kind of plays around with Doom, and with Marie, it was sort of like, well, she has this powerful ability involving Doom, but then she has this really bad weakness, Baron Samedi, and Amina somehow has kind of like a worse version of the ability and an even worse version of the weakness, kind of.
Yes, I think the only pro about the weakness is that it's great art by Adam S. Doyle. That's it.
Yeah, that is really good. I do like that.
All Adam S. Doyle art is
great.
So.
That is pretty solid. Like I don't want to be like crazy negative here, but like I'm just not really seeing a lot of upside.
Yeah, she's a hard sell. I think her card pool also doesn't help her much because she has Mystic cards and Charms, and there's very few Charms outside of Mystic.
It's also really funny that she only gets up to level 4 charms. Like if they printed a really good level 5 Guardian charm, be like, nope, sorry, can't play it.
It's sort of the Ursula thing. Ursula has 0 to 5 Seeker and then 0 to 4 relics.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they don't want her to have the level 5 relics, but also because they're too powerful. But also charms, like, come on, there's not nearly as many charms, right? I think so. The issue with Doom and Amina is that. So rogues and mystics have always been like the risk classes, right? Where rogues are basing their playstyle on really high value plays at the risk of a lot of like skill cards being dumped into the bin with no potential upside if you auto fail or something, right?
Sure.
That is only taking away from that rogue's ability to contribute, whereas Doom is affecting everybody, regardless of everybody wants that to affect everybody or not. Amina playing something for 3 cheaper is effectively saying, in a 4-player team, everybody has 3 less actions potentially. And that's like very scary. Like you need a good reason or a good compensation to be threatening your team that way. So that's how I think of it. And I feel like Amina's like, if she had 4s in all her stats, I'd be like, all right, it's getting good, but
What about in solo? Is she any good in solo? Like 3s in all stats.
I could imagine she wouldn't be that bad in solo.
Doesn't care about money, so she can play stuff more easily.
Right.
Is that anything?
If you pointed a hyperphysical shotcaster at my head and said I had to play Amina in a campaign, I would want to play like an easy solo campaign, and I would.
The funny thing is, you wouldn't even play hyperphysical shotcaster because all her stats are 3s.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't, and I would still be miserable the whole time, even having to do that. So yeah, roll like, I mean, I guess kind of hybrid like most mystics, but I don't know. Yeah,
could kind of do anything really.
any favorite cards that we haven't already mentioned?
I mean, the suite of charm cards that comes in the Scarlet Keys does somewhat work with her. It's just they don't have the action compression that I like, but they do let you do tests. They give boost if they have Doom on them. They give a boost to whatever test you do it with, and so you can still use combat or intellect or whatever, and you get a little boost on that. There are a couple more Doom cards that were added in the expansion. Sin Eater is a way to suck up Doom. Ellie,
fantastic card.
I don't remember. I don't remember the last
Rubash.
name. Ellie, the new ally, lets you attach cards to her, and you get a bonus when you use that have Doom on them, and you get to ignore one Doom on the card, and I think you get a skill bonus when you use the effects on it.
Does that count for the purpose of Deafening Silence, or is it still on there for the purpose of that?
It definitely counts.
It definitely is.
You ignore it for when you check the Doom threshold or something.
It's really bad. Yeah.
The one charm card that isn't in Mystic is the Dream Diary is a charm, right?
Okay. Yeah, there's a few others. There's Nightmare Bauble and other things that are pretty relevant, but
I meant good cards. That
wow.
No, Nightmare Bauble's fine as a late stage when you want to.
Ben, I wish I could high five you right now from across the country, but it doesn't work that way.
But yeah, Dream Diary is a way to help her boost her stats pretty easily. Getting a skill card every round that you can boost yourself is helpful. So she has options. I maybe in the future we'll get more charm cards outside of Mystic, similar to Mateo got new bless cards, and Rita's slowly getting more tricks. I don't know what Rita's level is at this point, but so maybe in an expansion or two we can look back at her and she's like, oh, here's a cool combo that really makes her pop off or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, last thing to say, if you think you've made an Amina deck that's actually really dope in a hard mode run or something like that, I mean, but yeah, send us a comment, tell us about it. I would be really curious to see. Please
that
because I think you would have to come up with some really creative possibility that we're not seeing, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What movie did we pick for Amina?
Yeah, so we picked a movie came out a little while ago called Vast of Night. Which is a very interesting sort of spooky movie that's based in the 1950s about a switchboard operator, what Amina does, and a DJ, a radio DJ, who sort of have this weird audio frequency that's coming through this small town somewhere in the Midwest. And it gets spooky as they sort of try to unravel what this frequency is saying or trying to, convey to them. And it's spooky and maybe spooky aliens are involved in some way or horrors are involved in another way. And it's very, very well done. It's a debut directing by Andrew Patterson.
It's a really low budget indie movie, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of really good cinematography, really good character building.
Probably not as low budget as Don't Let the River Beast Get You, but certainly still pretty low. Yeah, I heard about this. I haven't seen it yet, but I definitely want to. I've heard really good things about it.
It's a great movie. Very stylistic.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm surprised you haven't gotten Don't Let the River Beast Get You or one of the other films in that series on this list yet.
I don't know. I don't know if that's we had a whole separate podcast about that. So.
That'll be Hank's.
maybe, yeah, maybe, yeah. Oh, actually, maybe. Okay. Anything else about Amina, or should we move on to our next investigator?
Let's move on.
Let's move on to the next investigator.
All right.
Maybe the most hype.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really the investigator that really has turned the Survivor class around and really revitalized it. Really brought Survivor up to the big leagues. So this is Daryl Simmons, the photographer, who's the Survivor in this box. His stat line, wow, that was a pretty good stat line. He's got 2 willpower, 5 intellect, 2 combat, 3 agility. He's a reporter. You begin the game with Daryl's Kodak in play. Free trigger during a skill test at your location. Spend 1 evidence from an asset you control. Reduce the difficulty of this test by 2. Limit once per test. Elder Sign +1. Place an evidence on an asset you control. He's got 6 health and 8 sanity. For deck building, 30 cards. Survivor 0 to 5. Seeker 0 to 2. Ooh, okay. Neutral 0 to 5. And then, so Daryl's Kodak, his signature card, is a 2-cost asset with an intellect, agility, and a wild icon. It's an item and a tool. And it says, so after an enemy or treachery enters play, exhaust Daryl's Kodak, place a resource from the token pool on it as evidence. And reaction, after you discover any number of clues, move that many evidence on enemies or treasuries at that location or not at any location to Daryl's Kodak. It's pretty complicated. It's basically like when something comes into play, once per turn, you can put a token on it. And then if you happen to get a clue on the location that card is, you can sort of slurp up that evidence and add it to one of your evidence cards. So it's like a way to get more evidence. And it's nice that it starts in play, so it's not like you actually have to, pay for it and play it.
Dig it out.
His weakness is called Ruined Film. It's a blunder. Classic blunder. Revelation, remove 4 evidence from cards you control. For each evidence you can't remove this way, take 1 horror. I played Daryl in our Innsmouth run at Arkham Knights. I think all 3 of us have played Daryl in a campaign, right?
Yeah, I've also played Daryl.
I played him in a standalone.
I played Daryl for the campaign I did with Harrison. Was it Alice in Wonderland? Yeah. Before
we even talk about mechanical strengths, I just have to say this is a sharp-looking suit and hat combination in the art. Like that, this is a well-dressed man with a cool camera. Like I love the classic old cameras that have like the kind of accordion thing and like the one-use light bulb and the giant.
Oh,
cup.
Sure, yeah.
That's just awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we spoiled Daryl, right?
We did
when he first came out.
Yeah.
Was a grand old time.
So I guess we've talked about him already a bit, but
which was great. So what are Daryl's strengths?
What aren't Daryl's strengths? I guess
Scarlet.
He's not...
yeah, right? Like, what doesn't he do?
I think the stat line, the access to secret cards, and the pretty good ability, to me, are like the main ones.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of pros. So
like this is a guy who's going to be pathfindering. He's going to be level 2 perceptioning.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be up to a lot of stuff. He's going to be cracking cases left and right,
Reducing the difficulty of tests, like any test. I'm guessing it was filthy in my standalone experience. I'm sure that was fantastic for you in being a pretty versatile mechanic for friends and allies, right?
Kind of. I mean, the thing is, if you have enough of like an evidence engine going, you eventually just have a lot of evidence, and you're easily at the point where you can kind of, whenever someone's doing a test, if they need help, you can just toss them an evidence and make it easier, and that feels pretty good.
Right. It helps they added a couple evidence cards in this that synergize with them as well too.
They certainly did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he does kind of have different directions he can go, right? Like, you could go in a kind of reduced test to 0 direction, which I didn't really do any of that, but you definitely could, and I think in lower player counts that might be pretty good. I built him as just a straight up like research notes machine, and it was really disgustingly broken, and probably a lot of those cards should be banned. Like, honestly, I didn't even really need the evidence ability that much. I was kind of using it for treacheries and stuff, and it was pretty nice. But
sure,
the thing is, the research notes test is already a 0, so you can't really use it for that. So, right. But it's just kind of bonkers. Like, just
Yeah, I didn't go full Seeker with him, but I had a lot of Seeker and had a handful of like Survivor cards that like Lucky and some stuff for intellect, for skill tests like Winging It and Sharp Visions and stuff. Because when I played him before the whole card suite was available.
Right.
So I was kind of using what we had already, but he used Hawkeye folding camera, take pictures of stuff, use his stats.
You can recycle ice picks with scavenging,
Milan,
right?
Yeah, the ice pick recycle scavenging engine. You can run that as well. So he just has a lot of options for getting clues efficiently.
See, those all seem really good, but honestly, if you're playing Daryl and you just want to get clues very so efficiently that you will, again, it should be banned. Just go research notes plus what's the latter card called? The surprising thing that you find out, which is what every secret card is called.
Captivating Discovery? No, shocking.
It's not Shocking Revelation. It's not. Is it Captivating Discovery? I'm sorry. There's just so many at this point. I've forgotten which is which.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Captivating Discovery. The falling off the ladder.
Yeah. Like, honestly,
another card spoiled.
If you just the thing is, if you just go research notes plus Captivating Discovery, you'll draw a lot of cards and you'll get a lot of evidence. And then you use the evidence, and then knowledge is power, which should definitely be banned at this point. Let's be real here for a second.
Completely unfair.
And it's like super archaic glyphs. Like, it's arguably better than and you don't need to be Daryl to play this, by the way. You can play this in like Daisy or whatever if you want to just like completely break the game in half. But like, it is a pretty fun way for Daryl to go, because it doesn't require any like high level secret cards. It's all like level 0, level 1 type stuff.
It also, I've seen it in a standalone be played with just like literally 8 experience, like that. That sweet,
exactly.
Like, and that was including things like quick study, which may or may not be important, but
right.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous.
I ran out of stuff to spend XP on real fast in that Innsmouth run because it was like you just get all your stuff really fast, and it's like what am I like? I got everything I need here, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
So is that a downside? Maybe.
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean, like,
good that you
his card pool. He has a lot of good cards in his card pool, but there's not a lot of stuff to spend XP on. That's basically fine. Like, honestly, great for Scarlet Keys because what we found so far is you do not get a lot of experience in Scarlet Keys.
Right.
I guess, do we want weaknesses? I guess he's not
His
good at...
weaknesses. Well, his weakness is kind of scary. Like, it's really annoying because 4 evidence is kind of a lot. If you draw it like turn 1 before you have any, it's just like 4 horror to the face can be kind of scary. Because he has okay defensive stats, but he's not like great at treacheries really, unless he has evidence to protect him from it.
Right.
So that's kind of scary. And also like...
He has to set up a little bit, but...
Yeah.
I think less than a lot of others.
Well, kind of. I mean, I think like... It's sort of like, do you have ways to get evidence? Like there's a little more setup than maybe some other decks. I do think that the kind of mini game where you like put an evidence on something and then like try to take a picture of it is very fun. I tended to like get bored and stop doing that once I had enough evidence because it kind of
makes sense.
It's kind of a crapshoot. Like sometimes it's pretty easy. Other times there's just not really a good way to do it. So you just whatever.
Yeah. I'll say the other research or the other evidence cards that you're just sort of building passively, right? So.
Yeah, and I even like, I mean, I even stopped playing Hawkeye Folding Camera pretty quickly because it was like just Captivating Discovery and Research Notes was just going nuts, like absolutely, with a little bit of forewarn and quick study here and there, but like Research Notes alone will just get you, and that's your hand slot, so you don't really have enough to also have cameras out, but...
Right.
Yeah, not a whole lot of weaknesses. For role, expert clue getter, basically, and some support by helping people with evidence, right?
Sure. Totally.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really do much of a hybrid build with him necessarily, unless you really... I guess you could evade some stuff maybe, but...
You could help him evade stuff because of his evidence you can use to reduce, and you could even, if you wanted to, you could get like flashlight, the upgraded flashlight and stuff, but...
Just play him in like a 3 or 4 player game and get a million clues, and it's going to go pretty well for him.
I mean, he's fine at every player count, right? I'm sure he's fine. Like, survivors are always fine in solo, too.
I think he would be great in 2-player
things.
with like anyone that can keep enemies off of him. He would just clean up all the clues and you would do great. So yeah, you could
totally.
I think that would go pretty well.
If he has his evidence going, you can kind of think, oh, he's basically has +2 in every stat. Plus, there's survivor nonsense for reducing test down to 0 for stuff. So he.
Oh yeah.
I mean, in solo, I imagine enemies would be a little bit tougher for him to deal with, but like if he wants to actually kill them.
Sure.
I think like Captivating Discovery is worse in solo just because there's fewer, you got to move around more to get 3 clues. Like dropping 3 clues, because you obviously want to drop 3 clues. Like dropping 3 clues is a lot more kind of relative terms in solo than it is in 3 or 4 player, but...
Sure, yeah.
But on the other hand, cameras may be better in lower player counts. So
there's so many other builds, right? There's so many other things you can do with them.
Favorite cards. So yeah, most of the not every evidence card in the game, but most of them are at least worth kind of looking at. The classic level 0 to 2 seeker stuff like Crack the Case and Pathfinder and Shortcut and Practice Makes Perfect. All of those are of course excellent, right? Any other favorite cards we should mention?
I mean, we haven't played it ourselves yet, but the reduced test to 0 cards I think would synergize well with him because he can enable them much more easily.
Shadowlight is huge.
That's what I'm running in the Windy deck in Scarlet Keys, and sometimes it's hard to get it going, but with him being able to reduce test by 2 on top of all the other cards, probably pretty easy to get that going.
Piece of cake. Yeah. Yeah, he can use Gumption, he can use the flashlight level 3s, he can totally wreck things, resourceful it back, ice picks, all that
He
stuff.
can gump it up with the best of them. I just want to point out, this is apropos of nothing, but I just want to point out that despite the fact that he is a survivor, there is no legal obligation in the game rules to play any survivor cards in the Daryl deck. You certainly can, but you shouldn't feel like you have to. So just keep that in mind if you're building Daryl.
Wow. Well, anyway.
What
movie?
That's the Dan Daryl challenge. You know.
Yeah, which movie did we choose for Daryl?
What movie did we choose for Daryl?
A movie that Ben has seen.
It is a movie I have seen as of today.
That isn't a Marvel movie.
It's not a Marvel movie. It's called Rear Window. I don't remember any other facts about it. It's from like 1950 something. No, it's by Alfred
Hitchcock movie.
That's right.
Yes, but that's pretty important.
Alfred Hitchcock movie. That's right. That's the key point. It's a movie about a photographer, but he's broken his leg, so he's stuck in his apartment for like a week or 6 weeks or whatever. And he's spending the time, because it's 1950s, so what are you going to do? It's really hot out,
So he just kind of spends the whole time just kind of staring out his back window of his like apartment complex and just observing people.
As you do.
He gets some massages. He drinks alcohol. He talks with his old friend guy
he's
or
got
whatever.
he's got a
who's
girlfriend
cop.
and like an old army buddy, and is she a nurse? The person that kind of helps make sure his muscles don't fall apart while he's healing from his broken leg. But yeah, he's kind of hanging out, and he starts observing some things that are a little spooky, and he's got to solve a mystery while being stuck in his apartment with some help from some friends, and his detective buddy doesn't believe him. So it's a good time. He does utilize the camera in very interesting ways. I don't know if he ever actually takes a picture with it, but he utilizes other aspects of the camera's technology in order to solve a crime. So
Much like Daryl Simmons does.
so yeah, it's a good time. Good 1950s movie.
Pretty good. All right, so on to the last investigator in the box, right?
The sixth and final one. And for the first time in 4 expansions, we have a neutral investigator. They're coming back. This is Charlie Kane, the politician. He is one of the most interesting stat lines of all. 1 will, 1 intellect, 1 combat, and 1 agility. Very exciting. He's a civic and a socialite. Right off the bat, you have 3 additional ally slots.
Optimized stats. No stat points wasted, but getting like a 3 or a 2 or anything.
Right. Oh yeah. No. It's all put into allies. So, and then a fast action. During a skill test, you are performing exhaust an ally asset you control. For this test, you get +1 skill value, plus an additional 1 for each skill icon that ally has that matches that test's type. Elder Sign is a +3, ready an ally asset at your location, and it's 6 health, 6 sanity. Deck building is deck size 30. At deck creation, you choose 2 classes, Guardian, Seeker, Rogue, Mystic, or Survivor. And then deck building options are ally card 0 to 5, neutral card level 0 to 5, cards of your chosen classes level 0 to 2. So very unique deck building. On top of that, his signature is Bonnie Walsh, Loyal Assistant, Ally Civic Assistant traded, 2 wild icons. She has a reaction ability that says, after you exhaust Bonnie Walsh, ready another ally asset you control, limit once per round, 2 health and 2 sanity, and takes up your ally slot. And then the weakness is Burden of Leadership, which is a flaw. Revelation, if you control no ally assets, shuffle Burden of Leadership back into your deck. Otherwise, for each ally asset you control, either exhaust it or deal it 1 direct damage and 1 direct horror. And Ben, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they are going to put an errata at some point through for this to be a must clause.
Yeah, there's been an FAQ response saying that they intend to errata it to be must, because right now it does a pathetic weakness that does nothing most of the time. So
yeah. So Charlie Kane is one of the most varied investigators, kind of similar to Lola in a way, in that you can sort of paint them any color that you want among all of the classes and play a huge variety of decks with him, right? But they're all ally centric. You get to use every single ally in the book.
It's really funny that in his flavor text, his political platform seems to be very boring. It's like lower taxes, better schools, less crime. You go back this far into the past to the 20s, I would expect a typical politician to have a platform like make it illegal for Catholics to be in government, and triple the tobacco tax, and reform the way that post office employees are hired or something. They were just always into weird stuff back then. So Charlie Kane. So this is I would say the weird one of the set, even though most of them kind of compete for that title a little bit.
Yeah, the puzzle one, right?
So what are Charlie Kane's strengths?
It's kind of hard to talk about him just because there's 10 different class combinations that he can be, and
right.
I'm sure some of them are a little bit stronger than others in different aspects. That Dana and Harrison participated in Veronica's from Until the End of Time.
There's the Many Faces of Charlie.
Many Faces of Charlie set of videos and podcasts and stuff. So you guys talked about, was it Guardian Survivor that you guys did?
Yep, yeah. That was the one that you played with through Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a more fighty-centric type thing. I think in terms of strengths, allies, right? Deck building, you get to do whatever you want. you can build the most decks that any investigator can build, like the most flavors of decks that any investigator can build, and take any allies in the game, literally any allies in the game outside of obviously signatures and things like that, which is wild and something that I think nobody was prepared for. And since then, there have been so many Charlie decks that have popped up on ArkhamDB, and people experimenting with all different kinds of allies together that they weren't able to previously. Yeah, so strengths, really versatile. Can pretty much do anything, I feel like, as long as the ally support, you get the experience to play the allies, obviously. You get sort of an entry level into any of the classes, right? 0 to 2 Seekers, you're playing all those perceptions, deductions, goodness. 0 to 2 Guardians, same thing. Level 2 Vicious Blows, level 2 Overpowers, all that goodness. You sort of get like a good solid foot into any of the classes that you choose. Yeah, so I feel like that's outlining a lot of strengths here. Obviously, you get a lot of ally slots. 4 ally slots to start with is wild. Especially with your ally, Bonnie, is huge. It's a really, really good linchpin for Charlie in terms of strengths. It's just 2 wilds, which turns into 3 when you're using her to contribute to any skill test. And then she also can ready something like a Beat Cop, or, like a Lola Santiago to go get you another clue or something like that for the turn, or contribute more skills to stuff. So I think there's a lot of strengths, pretty versatile.
Yeah, definitely versatile in the sense that Lola is, in the sense that like you can pretty much point the deck into whatever direction you want. Like you can put almost any card except for, so like things higher than level 2 that aren't neutral. Like, yeah, you can't really get those, but yeah. Okay. So like versatility in terms of like how good his ability is, kind of talking about strengths and flaws. The way it kind of looks to me is like, okay, let's suppose you have 3 allies out. Because you can, or 3 or 4 allies, like you have a lot of allies, right? And let's suppose they all have 2 question mark symbols on them. Then you can basically make most of your tests be at a base skill of 4, right? Because you can kind of like add 3 symbols to, you have enough allies that like if you do say 4 tests per turn, you can be at like a 4 in all of them. That's like sort of okay, but how good is that really, right? Like if you're fighting a lot, you would rather just have like a base of like high combat. Probably if you're investigating a lot, you'd rather have just like a base of high agility. Like I guess it's more flexible, so maybe it's good in maybe he's like a better solo deck kind of.
I think it depends on what class combos he's using, because those allies have other benefits other than just being able to be exhausted to give him stat boosts.
It's true, but you might have to exhaust them to get those benefits for somebody like Lola Santiago or Beat Cop or something, Yeah,
so you have to make a decision there. I mean, those guys also give passive stat boosts to help you out, but
true.
I mean, his main weakness for me was, I think, his setup situation. Was
yes.
He has to get his allies out, and he doesn't have too much ways to. It depends what card pool you get, I guess. But
he needs an absolutely massive amount of money generally to play, because allies. Yeah. The thing is, like, allies tend to be pretty expensive cards. Like they're generally good but expensive. If you think about it, like every deck could take 2 charismas, right? And yet usually you don't. Like a lot of decks I make don't take any charismas, and some of them take 1. Very few of them take 2, because even if you can play a lot of allies, a lot of times it's like you don't want to spend the actions and resources to get them out, right?
I mean, in the old days we did take 2 charismas, or at least 1.
I think
that was for lack of other. That was for lack of diversity in the card pool.
That's why we did the Chromo Charisma at the time. It was like, oh yeah, we take this every single.
But these
deck.
days, like a lot of decks don't play any charismas, right?
True.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's you have to get a set of allies that you want that synergize with whatever combo of classes you have. You're right in that it's kind of like you can, if you spread out your tests, then you get up to like a 4 or whatever by tapping a couple allies. I think if you focus your deck, you can get allies that have 2 symbols on them, and when you tap them, they, give you +3, or you can have 5 or 6 allies out and tap 2 of them each test and be at like a 6 or whatever. But you have to get that set up to get it going, and that is a cost, right? Getting set up. And you're right, the money, if you're not playing like Rogue or or a class that has good money engine, then yeah, also the money's a struggle, which I think that's something Colin struggled with when we did the Survivor Rogue. He needed a lot of money. Luckily, Kamani was like really good at stealing stuff and like giving him extra money to be in each scenario.
And Carson also helping with money and ever vigilance and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it seems like I would say Guardian is going to be a pretty good class, just because you do get access to things like motivational speech and things like or what's the skill card, Inspiring Presence, things like that would be pretty good.
Yeah.
But you can definitely find some cards that are good in any of the 5 classes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like, it's really hard to, again, because there's so many directions you can go with it, it's kind of hard to nail this down. But to me, it seems like the weakness is sort of just like lots of setup, and at the end of the day, like, how good is having like 3 charismas? Because like, you could just play a regular deck and have 2. Right, and yeah, you know,
like to play Charlie and have 2, and that's
well,
like 6 allies.
That's true. But I'm just saying, like, yeah, like how good is it to be able to play all the allies in the game? Is that worth having all of your base stats be 1s? And I'm not sure that it is, but I think this is at least like an interesting deck building challenge that a lot of people will have a lot of fun with.
Yeah, I think that's the big pro here. The big con is that he is essentially nothing without his allies. Like literally nothing without his allies, in fact. And another big pro is that I have definitely seen a 16 sled dog Charlie Kane be played at a War of the Outer Gods in person, which was glorious. Anyway, favorite cards.
Dogs? Did he take other people's sled dogs somehow?
They teamworked them around the table. Everybody took 4 sled dogs and teamworked them to Charlie, and Charlie had 16 sled dogs.
That's a lot.
And
of
dealt
dogs.
So dumb, but
dealt the big elder god a bunch of dog damage.
So we're not going to talk about the movie yet, but I assume we picked the movie Hotel for Dogs for Charlie. he's gonna need a hotel for all those dogs. For real though, so role for Charlie again feels like it could be basically anything because of the flexibility. Like Colin played him as a fighter in our Innsmouth run at Arkham Knights.
Sure.
Right.
But I think you could go in different directions. You could play Lola Santiago and go for clues, whatever.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. Favorite cards? Allies and ally accessories, right?
Good, good allies. Things that desperately pour money into your unfillable money hole because you need, like politicians, you need as much money as you can possibly get to pay people off. Yeah, you'll never have enough money ever, so just play all the money cards you can possibly get. Things that help you leverage your allies in some way are going to be good. Like if you're already playing allies with good icons and you want to get even more stat boosts, you could play well prepared's level 3, isn't it? So I guess you can't play that. But
yeah.
Okay, well, things of that nature. Any other special cards that are really good for Charlie?
That's it. If anybody has any specific cards that they've had great experiences with that we haven't mentioned, feel free to sound off in Discord or wherever.
For the movie for Charlie Kane, I mean, I think Charlie Kane is like a very old school Arkham Files investigator. Like, I think he dates back from one of the very early Arkham horror things. Is that right, Ben?
I want to say he was an early edition. I can't remember. I don't think he's an original OG Call of Cthulhu one, but I think he was.
He's not.
Like, the reason I suspect that is because the first couple rounds of investigators, they would just like, they would put in characters that were like really basic spins on like existing characters from movies and stuff, and they would just like change the name a little bit, like Monterey Jack. So Charlie Kane is basically just literally Charles Foster Kane from Citizen Kane, right? It's like the time period's a little different, but the idea of kind of like a politician who's kind of like an orator. And Citizen Kane's a really great movie. So
that's the best ever made.
That is true. That's what we picked. So if you want to really have a good time, watch a double feature of Citizen Kane and David Fincher's Mank, which came out a couple years ago, which is kind of a companion piece. So have a good time with it. Have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, has 100% Rotten Tomatoes score or 99% or something like that? Yeah,
I mean it's impossible.
You're not going to go wrong.
Even Don't Let the Rubber Beast Get You doesn't have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The thing is, once anything gets close, there's a huge incentive for anybody to have like a scorching hot take, which I respect completely.
Sure.
So, but certainly almost everyone would agree a very good movie.
I just looked up some Charlie trivia, and he wasn't introduced until Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, not until the 4th expansion, the Kingsport expansion. Huh. I thought he was a little bit earlier in the game than that. I also learned that the character from Citizen Kane, Charles Foster Kane, was actually based on William Rudolph Hearst, who I assume is a real person. So
and a character in the film Mank, played by the guy from Game of Thrones, I think.
Okay.
So. But he's still a classic.
I would also mention Citizen Kane. It's from the early 40s, but it's a very watchable movie. It's not like if you're not used to watching old movies, it's not going to like be boring and weird. Like you'll have a great time watching it, even if you don't typically watch stuff like that.
Yeah, Orson Welles always had a way with making things intriguing and interesting and keeping action pacing up and stuff. So yeah,
It moves along briskly. A lot of stuff happens in it. It's not it's not like a heavy lift. You'll have a good time with it.
yeah. Well, with that, we wrap up the Investigators of the Scarlet Keys. What is your experience with all these investigators? And is there any Amina and Charlie Tech we've missed? I know that we were sort of maybe a little bit more down on them because we haven't had much experience, or our experiences were maybe sort of like not as great. So if you have any cool decks that you made that have done really well, let us know. Reach out to us, leave us a comment, or email us at comments@mur.fm. Follow us on social networks including Instagram, Facebook, or join our Discord server to hang out. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Twitch. You can find a link to all of these at social.mur.fm. And if you really enjoy what we do, we always appreciate a nice review on your favorite podcast source. It really helps others find us. Also, we've mentioned a lot of playthroughs with us playing these investigators, and you can find all of those as live play VODs on YouTube. We will be going live on Twitch from time to time with MUR Plays things. With that said, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.